Hello, everybody. In Chapter 3, we're going to be building off of what we learned in Chapter 2, and we're going to be talking about doing business in global markets. So, the things we're going to be covering here is just the dynamic global market. Why do we trade with other nations? Get involved with global trade, strategies for reaching global markets, forces affecting trading in global markets, trade protection, and then the future of global trade. Overall, we have over 90% of companies doing business globally believe it is important for employees to have international experience. Right here in the United States, U.S. organizations are also expanding abroad. And then we have two topics here, importing and exporting. So, importing is buying products from another country, exporting is selling products to another country. So, probably heard a lot about importing and exporting here recently on the news just because we are in a bit of a trade war with China. So any products that we're sending over there, we're exporting, and then they are putting a tariff on that just because we're putting on tariffs on Chinese products. So it's just kind of a competition between the two right now. So hopefully we get that figured out here in the near future just because know a lot of farmers, friends with a lot of farmers who are kind of feeling the impact of that, especially with tariffs and extra taxes being put on corn and soybeans, which is cutting into their profits and hurting their pocketbooks. So those like I said, two really big topics right now. And President Trump right now, he's all about trying to find really good situations for us when it comes to importing and exporting. But he just wants the best deal for the United States. Can't say I blame him there. So down here, this third bullet point, the United States is the third or is the largest importing and the third largest exporting nation in the world, meaning we're taking in more products than we're sending out to other nations. When we look around the landscape, here's a map of the world population by continent. Um, when you look over at North America, only 7.4% is over here in North America. And I mean, that includes Mexico, Canada, United States. Um, so, I mean, that's a pretty small number when you think about how many people are here just in the United States. When you look over in Asia, we have, countries like India, we have China over there. You know, South and North Korea. So quite a few people just in Asia. So I mean that's a really big market. Obviously China does a lot of producing over there, and they're kind of able to produce for the entire continent. But the United States does a lot of business with Asia as well. World population by growth. So currently, here in 2017, we were at 7.25 billion people in the world, and it's estimated to be by 2100 we're going to have 11.25 billion people in the world. So we're going to see an uptick in the people in this world, and I know that's been a constant topic of discussion is how are we going to feed all these people in this world, and that's just coming up with different resources and different ways of producing food. One of the things that is really big in the news right now is talking about plant-based diets, just because it is a lot easier to produce plants than it is animals. So, like Impossible Burger, different things like that becoming more popular just because if we can go more towards a plant-based diet, maybe that's just going to be better for the world and better to feed all these people. Just because that is a constant concern with with this growing population is how are we going to feed everybody in the long term. So countries with abundant natural resources like Venezuela or Iraq need technological resources from other countries like Japan. Global trade allows countries to produce what they make best and buy what they need from others. So free trade is just the movement of goods and services among nations without political or economic barriers. The pros and cons of free trade. So we'll look here. The pros first. Global market contains over 7 billion potential customers of goods and services. Productivity grows when countries produce goods and services. Global competition and less costly imports keep prices down, so inflation does not curtail economic growth. Free trade inspires innovation for new products and keeps firms competitively challenged, and then uninterrupted flow of capital gives countries access to foreign investments, which help keep interest rates low. Some of the cons: domestic workers, particularly in manufacturing-based jobs, can lose their jobs due to increased imports of production shifts to low-wage global markets. Workers may be forced to accept pay cuts from employers. moving operations overseas because of intense competition. Pressure often means the less of service jobs and growing number of white collar jobs, and then domestic companies can lose their comparative advantage when competitors build advanced production operations in low wage countries. So. A really good example is that in the 1990s we had NAFTA, which was the North American Free Trade Agreement, meaning any product that was made in North America could be across country lines. So anything that was made in Mexico can come over to the United States. There was no tariff thrown on that. And then I guess I should also probably address the tariff. So tariffs is just a tax that's put on um, uh, foreign products coming into the United States. Same way, if it's going from the United States to another country, other countries will put tariffs on that. The reason why we have tariffs is to just kind of deter global trade, and hopefully individuals will buy local products here, within your own country. But going back to NAFTA, so if anything was made in Canada, it could come in the United States. No tariff was thrown on that, and vice versa. Anything made in the United States could go to Canada or Mexico, and nothing was put on that as far as tariffs. So the goal, I guess, in the long term is to have free trade throughout the world. I know President Obama was pretty close with getting a free trade agreement with countries in the Pacific like Japan and like China, to where there wouldn't be any tariffs on any of those products. Pros and cons to both, kind of like what we discussed here. Whenever we're dealing with smaller third world countries, I mean we see it all the time with like factory jobs where some of these factory jobs like Nike was in the news a lot in the 1990s, where they were essentially running sweatshops in third world countries to produce sneakers instead of making it here in the United States. Nike isn't the only person or only company that's doing that sort of thing. It kind of goes, in every company, any big time company that is. And whenever you can find lower wage, jobs that are able to make a product for you, I mean, businesses are going towards that just because they can save money in the long run. So, like I said, pros and cons to free trade. So, be interested to see kind of where this goes in the next 20, 30 years and beyond that. So the theories of comparative and absolute advantage. So comparative advantage, countries sell to other countries those products that it produces most efficiently, and buy from other countries those products that it cannot produce as effectively or efficiently. And then absolute advantage is a country has a monopoly on producing a specific product, or is able to produce it more efficiently than all other countries. I would say a really good example of like absolute advantage would be over in the Middle East. They produce a lot of oil, and they're able to send it all over the world, and that's really kind of their only resource that they have over there. I mean, it's a pretty big desert, and they're just producing a ton of oil out there. So talking about debt here in the United States, we kind of talked about it in the last chapter. So when you look over here, so you've got the UK owns a little bit of the United States debt, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and then when you look at Japan and China, they own a ton of the United States debt. And when I say debt, kind of a quick explanation of this is say we own or say we owe $1 billion to a certain bank. Instead of owing that bank the entire amount, China might come in and offer to buy our debt and say you can pay us back um, in a longer period of time, but we're going to charge you at a different interest rate than you would at the bank. And the United States agrees to those terms. And right now, Japan and China have quite a bit of our debt out there. So that way, if you do hear that in the news about how the Japan or China owns the United States, I mean, it's technically not wrong just because we do owe them quite a bit of debt. So importing good and services. So students attending schools abroad tend to notice products that they're used to are available in their new country by working with producers in their native countries. Some become importers while still in school. So a really good example of this is my wife. Whenever she was in college, she lived abroad over in Spain, and she said that she would see tons of United States products over in Spain, but it just had like a different, kind of flair to it. And we'll kind of go over that here in a little bit, just about like different products, throughout the world that we might see here in the United States. Exporting provides a great boost to the U.S. economy. It's estimated every $1 billion in U.S. exports generates over 7,000 U.S. jobs. So, that's really good if we can create products here in the United States and send them elsewhere in the world. Balance of trade, that's just the total value of a nation's exports compared to an imports over a particular period. So a trade surplus, which is favorable, occurs when the value of country's exports exceeds its imports. And then a trade deficit, that's what we have here in the United States currently, occurs when the value of a country's imports exceed that of its exports. So we're taking in more, foreign products than we're sending out. Balance of payments, the difference between money coming in a country from exports and the money leaving a country from imports, plus money flows from other factors such as tourism, foreign aid, military expenditures, and foreign investment. The goal is to have more money flowing into a country than out, a favorable balance. An unfavorable balance is when more money flows out of a country. Dumping, which is the selling of products in a foreign country at a lower price than those charged in the producing country. So, dumping is prohibited. China and Brazil have been penalized for dumping steel in the United States, just because they can produce steel at such a low cost of it, and then sell it super cheap here in the U.S. So, some of the largest exporting nations in the world and the largest U.S. trade partners. Whenever you look here, it shows India as a top U.S. trading partner. We do a lot of business with China. We do a lot of business with Canada and Mexico. Going back to the NAFTA agreement I was talking about a few moments ago, even going over to Europe, between the Netherlands, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, all of these countries we do quite a bit of business with. So in the next few slides, we're going to be talking about strategies for reaching global markets. So here's just kind of a quick overview of it, between licensing, exporting, franchising, so on and so forth. So we'll go into those into more detail here in the next upcoming slides. So licensing, that's a global strategy in which a firm, the licensor, allows a foreign company, the licensee, to produce its product in exchange for a fee or a royalty in that situation. So licensing can benefit a firm by gaining revenues it wouldn't have otherwise generated and spending little or no money to produce or market their products. So a good example of licensing is Marvel has licensed many companies to make products related to successful film franchises like Guardians of the Galaxy. Do you think Marvel licensed products will maintain their global popularity with new generations of viewers? Overall, Marvel is just on top of the world right now between all the movies that they're producing. And it's whenever you think about movies, you can't just think about here in the United States. I mean, it's a global thing. All the Marvel movies have been really popular everywhere in the world. I mean, obviously they have to change the language settings on it and have somebody speak a different language on it, but at the same time, the movies still hold true, and then the licensing and all the merchandise throughout the world is a really big seller, especially for Disney in this point. So something to think about that it's not just a United States thing; it's globally. Exporting, so EACs provide hands-on exporting assistance and trade finance support for small and medium-sized businesses that wish to directly export goods and services. And then ETCs help companies engage in indirect exporting by matching buyers and sellers, dealing with foreign customs offices, documentation, and conversions. Franchising, a contractual agreement whereby someone with a good idea or business sells others the rights to use the name and sell a product or service in a given territory in a specified manner. Franchisers need to be careful to adapt their product to countries that they serve. A couple examples here: Domino's Pizza, Dunkin' Donuts all adapted their products to different tastes in different countries. McDonald's That's always a really big thing is if you go to a different McDonald's all over the world, you're going to see different products just because of different tastes and that sort of thing. Here is a really good example of Domino's pizza's toppings in Japan. So I'm not even going to attempt that first word, but it's beef with yolk sauce and onions. They have shrimp mayonnaise, uh, mayo jaga, maybe potato and pork sausage with mayonnaise, crab gratin, basil eggplant, um, garlic beef ribs with green pepper, seafood special, snow crab and shrimp. I mean, just a lot of weird toppings. Uh, yeah, so I mean, anytime you go on the internet, you can see a lot of these things out there, and different places just have different tastes, and that's what these organizations are kind of thinking of whenever they're coming up with these marketing campaigns. So we were just talking about McDonald's. So in Malaysia, um, you have chicken strips and porridge with onions, gingers, and shallots. Mexico, you have the McQueso, a burger topped with two cheese and queso sauce. I feel like the McQueso would do pretty well here in the United States, especially with how obsessed everybody is with queso, me included. We have Egypt. We have the kofta burger, which is minced meat patty with onion. That doesn't sound all that terrible. Japan, teratama, which is a teriyaki burger topped with an egg. Once again, that also sounds pretty good. I love burgers anyway, so I mean, I'm probably going to eat any of these burgers. In Germany, if you want a beer with your burger, you can order one at the German store, so that's a pretty cool thing. And then Israel, you have to think of like religious beliefs. And then in Israel, McDonald's operates using kosher kitchens. So yeah, these are things that you just kind of all have to take into consideration if you're thinking globally. Contract manufacturing, foreign companies' production of private label goods to which a domestic company then attaches its own brand name or trademark, part of the broad category of outsourcing. So, contract manufacturing can be used to allow a company to experiment in a new market without incurring a heavy startup cost, such as building a manufacturing plant, temporarily meet an unexpected increase in orders. So, a lot of the times you see this with like auto manufacturing where one auto manufacturer like Chevy might be might have some sort of deal with a auto manufacturer over in India, and Chevy might be like producing the car, but it's under like a different label or something along those lines. So a joint venture is a partnership in which two or more companies, often from different countries, join to undertake a major project. The benefits of joint ventures: shared technology and risk, shared marketing and management expertise, and then entry into markets where foreign companies are often not allowed unless goods are produced locally. So I know in the 1990s, Chevy had a joint venture with Toyota. Um, Toyota was supposed to teach Chevy about kind of like hybrid automobiles, and Chevy taught Toyota about manufacturing. Um, Toyota got the best of that deal just because Chevy just didn't necessarily listen to Toyota. They decided to go into a different route just based off of the United States wants and needs. Um, Chevy started to focus more on SUVs and trucks and put hybrid vehicles kind of behind them, and then Toyota ended up becoming very big with hybrid vehicles such as the Prius, just because they were kind of one of the first companies to come out with a hybrid, and then also they took the lessons that they had learned from Chevy when it come to manufacturing, and they were able to produce a really good product that the world wanted at that point, and now they're one of the leaders in the auto industry just based off of kind of what they were able to learn from Chevy. Strategic alliance, a long-term partnership between two or more companies established to help each company build competitive market advantages. They typically don't share costs, risks, managements, or profits. Strategic alliances provide broad access to markets, capital, and technical expertise. Foreign direct investment, just buying of permanent property and businesses in foreign nations, and then foreign subsidiary, a company owned in a foreign country by another company called the parent company. Primary advantage: parent company maintains complete control over its technology and expertise, and then primary disadvantage: must commit funds to technology within foreign boundaries. Multinational corporation, just an organization that manufactures and markets products in many different countries and has a multinational stock ownership and multinational management. Not all large global businesses are multinational. Only firms that have been manufacturing capacity or some other physical presence in different nations can truly be multinational. I would say, for multinational, automakers is a really big one. Toyota, that's the first one that kind of comes to mind just because they do have a global presence. Sovereign wealth funds, investment funds controlled by governments holding large stakes in foreign companies. The size of the funds and the fact that they are government owned makes some fear that they might get used for geopolitical objectives, gaining control of strategic natural resources, and obtaining sensitive technologies. So we're talking about, Toyota here. So the United States has been and remains a popular spot for foreign direct investment. Global automobile manufacturers like Toyota, Honda, and Mercedes have spent millions of dollars building facilities in the United States. Do you consider a Toyota made in Texas to be an American car or a Japanese car? I would consider it to be a Japanese car just because Toyota is based out of Japan. Um, but even though it's made in the United States, it's kind of a weird thing to think about. Even though when you look at like GM or Ford, they're based out of the United States for their headquarters, but they could have an automobile that's built over in China and they're just shipping it over here, and I would consider that an American vehicle. I don't know why that is. I mean, a lot of it has to do with just public perception and how they've marketed it. Um, but yeah, I'd be interested to kind of see what everybody else thinks about that. So, largest multinational corporations in the world. You've got Walmart here, State Grid, China National Petroleum, um, Sinopec Group. These ones here in China, I've technically never heard of. I had to look them up. And yeah, they don't do a whole lot here in the United States that we necessarily know of from a marketing standpoint. Just kind of looking at some of these companies here that maybe we have heard of: ExxonMobil, which is, we hear and see those all over. Volkswagen out of Germany, Toyota, Apple, and then, BP on there. So, forces affecting trading in global markets. So, we have sociocultural, economic and financial, legal and regulatory, physical and environmental. So, we'll kind of go over those here. So, sociocultural forces. To be involved in global trade, you must be aware of the cultural differences among nations, including social structures, religion, manners and customs, values and attitudes, language. Obviously that would probably be the biggest thing, and then personal communication. I had a professor in college who was telling me at one point that he had a friend that was over in, I think it was India, who was working for Pepsi. And over here in the United States, we take Fridays and Saturdays off, but over in India, they take Fridays and Saturdays off. So, over there, he was used to working and having Sundays off in the United States, but he was working on Sundays over in India. So, just kind of, different things like that kind of, can be confusing for somebody coming in, but you have to, be able to have good communication and make sure everybody's kind of on the same page whenever you're dealing with, multinational corporations. So a couple of things here. So the Coors Brewing Company put its slogan "Turn it loose" into Spanish and found it translated to "suffer from diarrhea." PepsiCo attempted a Chinese translation of "Come alive, you're in the Pepsi generation" that read to Chinese customers as "Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the dead." KFC's patented slogan "Finger licking good" was understood in Japanese as "Bite your fingers off." Purdue Chicken used the slogan "It takes a strong man to make a chicken tender," which was interpreted in Spanish as "It takes an aroused man to make a chicken affectionate." And then last one here on the other side of translation glitch, Electrolux, a Scandinavian vacuum manufacturer, tried to sell its products in the U.S. market with the slogan, nothing sucks like Electrolux. And we see these on the internet all the time about just like different marketing campaigns happening, throughout the world and just different meanings. Different countries have different censors for like commercials, so something that might be a little more scandalous, in other countries might be viewed a little bit differently here. One of the classic examples of selling product in a different country was in the 1970s. Chevy had the Chevy Nova, which Nova in Spanish translate to no go. So in Mexico, they were trying to sell the Chevy Nova, which is a car that translated to not going anywhere. Obviously, the Chevy Nova didn't do all that well in Mexico. So these are kind of some fun examples to kind of, think about whenever you're thinking about selling in different countries and just how language barriers can be such a big thing. So continue on with that, lost in translation. So Braniff Airlines slogan, flying leather, translated in Spanish as fly naked. Siri's Apple's digital assistant on iPhone is a common slang term for butt in Japanese. In Italy, Schweppes tonic water was mistaken as Schweppes toilet water. Um, and then Nokia's line in Lumia phones is Spanish for prostitute. So all these are great examples of getting lost in translation. So knowing cultural differences, in Turkey, it's rude to cross your arms while facing someone. I would be considered really rude in Turkey because I feel like I cross my arms all the time. In many Middle Eastern countries, you shouldn't eat or shake hands with left hand because it's considered unclean. I think I'd be okay there. I do most of my stuff on with right hand just because I'm right-handed, but individuals that are left-handed, I could see that being a problem. In India, you should never pat anyone's head. It's where one's soul is kept. And then Brazil, your meeting may not start on time because punctuality isn't important in that culture. So I would find that probably to be really frustrating. So we're talking about exchange rates here. So the value of one nation's currency relative to the currency of other countries. High value of the dollar. So dollars trading for more foreign currency, foreign products become cheaper. Low value of the dollar. Dollars trading for less foreign currency, foreign goods become more expensive. And then floating exchange rates. Currencies float in value depending on the supply and demand for their global market. So I do a whole lot of foreign currency at SEFQ. We do offer that as a service if somebody's going to be traveling abroad, or if they're just trying to get a good deal on the value of a foreign currency. We do have individuals who will come in and order whether it be the yen, the euro, something along those lines. Try to get it whenever it's going for a really good price, and then they'll sell it later on for a profit. Devaluation, which is the lowering of the value of a nation's currency relative to other currencies, and then counter trading, which is a complex form of bartering in which several countries may be involved, each trading goods for goods or services for services. So here we have a list of the top 10 American companies incorporated elsewhere, just trying to get in on better tax deductions. So we have, Carnival, which their taxing country is Panama. We've got, I'm trying to think of some of the, Eaton PLC, which is based out of, Cleveland, Ohio. Their taxing country is Ireland. So, there's been a lot of talk in the news about, trying to stop something like this. Garmin Limited, um, they're based out of Kansas, but yet their taxing country is Switzerland. So, at some point, the United States government really needs to step in just because they are losing out on tax dollars when it comes to these companies. Even though they're headquartered in the United States, they're using these other other countries for the tax deductions. And that's just not working out for the United States. So foreign tourists, when the dollar is up, foreign goods and travel are a bargain for U.S. consumers. When the dollar trades for less foreign currency, however, foreign tourists often flock to the United States city to enjoy relatively cheaper vacations and shopping trips. Do U.S. exporters profit more when the dollar is up or when it is down? I mean, I could kind of see it being, both ways. On that, I know, depending on where you're traveling in the world, you can get, different things at different prices. So it would just kind of be, depend on where you're going and when you're going, and if it would be, advantageous to you. Legal and regulatory forces. There's no global systems of laws. Laws may be inconsistent. U.S. businesses must follow U.S. laws while conducting global businesses. And then Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and Transparency, international fight to end corruption and bribery in foreign markets, and have had limited success. Bribery and corruption is a pretty common thing in a lot of countries. The United States is probably included in that as well, but we don't have as many as some of the other countries out there. So other countries, it might be a very common thing, and whenever you're doing business there, other countries might expect kind of bribery or corruption. Whereas here in the United States, we have a lot of laws put into place to hopefully stops that sort of thing, even though it does happen from time to time. So physical and environmental forces. Developing countries have transportation and storage systems that make international distribution difficult or impossible. Often technological capabilities are far from those in the U.S., which makes for a tough business environment. So for trade protection, the use of government regulations to limit the import of goods and services. We were talking about tariffs earlier, which is just a tax imposed on imports. So protective tariffs and revenue tariffs. Import quota, the limit on the number of products in certain categories that a nation can import, and then embargo, which is a complete ban on the import or export of a certain product, or the stopping of all trade with a particular country. Political disagreements can lead to embargo, like the U.S. embargo against Cuba. That's the classic example of the U.S. embargo. Um, Cuban cigars are a really big thing. Obviously, we're not supposed to have them in the United States, although some people that, will go down to Cuba or, that surrounding area and come back with them. One of my buddies, he was down in Mexico not that long ago. Mexico does not have a embargo with Cuba, so he was able to pick up some Cuban cigars there and get them back into the United States. It's one of those things that's kind of frowned upon whenever you're traveling throughout the world and bringing back Cuba products, but I think kind of for the most part, some of these, security guards are kind of looking the other way on it. So imported products and jobs. So some workers believe that too many U.S. jobs have been lost due to the growing number of imported products. Should government protect their industries by placing tariffs on imported products? Why or why not? So like we were talking about earlier, this is a really hot topic right now in the news with the trade war going on with China, and should we put more tariffs on our products? Should we not put it on? Like I said, there's pros and cons to both. Um, I believe in free trade, but I also believe that there should probably be some sort of tariff put on it to hopefully encourage individuals to buy United States products. But it's just one of those things that's going to have to sort itself out at some point. So the World Trade Organization, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, a 1948 agreement that established an international forum of negotiating mutual reductions in trade restrictions. In the World Trade Organization, an independent entity of 164 members whose purpose is to oversee cross-border trade issues and global business practices, headquartered in Geneva. Here we have common market, regional group of countries that have a common external tariff, no internal tariffs, coordination of laws to facilitate exchange, also called a trading bloc. Some common markets are the European Union, which right now you might have heard a lot about the European Union, especially with Brexit going on. And right here, in this map, it's showing that the UK is exiting the European Union. They're still trying to sort that out, so it's been been, I think, about 3 years since the United Kingdom voted to get out of the European Union. And the reason why they voted out of it was they were tired of carrying some of the countries in the European Union that weren't doing so well. So I know Italy, Spain um, had not been doing all that well, and we're going through depressions and recessions. The UK was trying, was having to come in and kind of bail them out. That's why they were getting out of the European Union. uh, the only issue with that is they voted to get out of the European Union, but they didn't necessarily have a plan on how to do it. And now they're still trying to figure that out, so that's going to be something that we're probably going to be hearing about for years to come. Talked about NAFTA a little bit earlier, which is just an agreement that created a free trade among United States, Canada, and Mexico, ratified in 1994. And then we also have the Central American Free Trade Agreement, which is an agreement created by a free trade zone with Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, signed into law in 2005. So with NAFTA, it eliminates trade barriers and facilitates cross-border movement of goods and services, promotes conditions of fair competition, increase investment opportunities, provide effective protection and enforcement of intellectual property, establishes a framework for further regional trade cooperation, and improve working conditions in North America. One of the biggest things that people talk about when it comes to NAFTA is sending a lot of the jobs to Mexico, just because typically in Mexico you don't have to pay workers down there as high of a wage as you would in the United States, just because of unions. So a lot of the manufacturing jobs are going down to Mexico. They're building some of these, whether it be automobiles or anything else in a manufacturer setting down in Mexico, and then they're sending it up to the United States, and they're making more profits off of it. That's just something that it's a con, definitely, and it's something that's going to have to be addressed. I know President Trump, he's not a real big fan of the NAFTA agreement right now, and he's trying to, sort of figure that out. But right now, he's kind of got his hands tied with, the whole thing with China. So the future of global trade, China, we have over 1.38 billion people in China. It's transformed the world from an economy standpoint, and over 400 of the Fortune 500 companies have invested in China. So obviously, it's very large right now. It's booming, and that's kind of where everything wants to be. India has seen huge growth in information technology, biotech, and pharmaceuticals. Russia is projected to be a wealthy global economy by 2025, but declining oil prices have slowed the economy, and also plagued by political, currency, and social problems. I don't necessarily agree that it's going to be a wealthy global economy by 2025, just because they do have such a huge political problem over there. Um, but it'll be interesting to see on that one. And then Brazil, seventh largest economy in the world, with well-developed agriculture, mining, manufacturing, services sectors. Um, Got one friend who his dad is in the mining industry and flies all over the world selling mining equipment. He's going down to Brazil quite a bit for that. And then also agriculture is becoming a huge thing down there, where there's not um, a whole lot of people living in Brazil in some of these areas, and they're able to just have these massive farms that just go on for miles and miles and miles, and you don't have to worry about having interstates get in the way. You don't have to worry about roads or towns get in the way. So agriculture in Brazil is definitely an up and coming thing, and something that United States has to watch out for. So the growth in China's economy is booming, and highly educated middle class with money to spend is emerging, especially in the cities. Many observers believe China will continue its growth and play a major role in the global economy. Are U.S. firms prepared to compete? Uh, I would say overall we we are prepared, and we're not prepared in certain situations. China, they put a lot of emphasis on education from a very early age. The United States is trying to catch up with that. The one thing that I will say that the United States kind of has an advantage on over China has been the community college system. Community colleges, for whatever reason, China just can't kind of get a grasp on. They've tried to implement them over there, and they're just failing on it. So community colleges, I think we do a great job of preparing our students to go out and get a career after 2 years of being in the community college. Whether you're going through a trade program, or whether you're just getting like a business degree through Lincoln Land, anything like that. Whereas over in China, they put a little more emphasis on going to 4-year universities, whether it be in China or coming over here to the United States. I know, I graduated from UIS, so when I was there, they had quite a few agreements with some Chinese colleges over there, where we would send students from the United States over to China to study abroad for a while, and then these Chinese universities were sending students over here to UIS to study. So pretty much every college, I think, in the United States has some sort of agreement with a school abroad, whether it be through China, someplace in Europe, something along those lines. Outsourcing, so the process whereby one firm contracts with other companies to do some or all of its functions. So U.S. firms have outsourced payroll functions, accounting, and manufacturing for years. With the growth of global markets, companies have been shifting to outsourcing, and outsourcing with other countries. So some of the pros and cons along with that. So pros, less strategic tasks can be outsourced globally so that companies can focus on areas in which they can excel and grow. Outsourced work allows companies to create efficiencies that in fact let them hire more workers. Consumers benefit from lower prices generated by effective use of global resources. Some of the cons, jobs may be lost permanently and wages fall due to low cost competition offshore. Offshore outsourcing may reduce product quality and can therefore cause permanent damage to a company's reputation. And then communication among company members with suppliers and customers becomes much more difficult. As far as just like overall quality, I mean, I know that's kind of one of the things that the unions really harp on, where if somebody's offshoring, some of their manufacturing jobs. Here in the United States, we have a very high standard of work. Whereas if they're going to a third world country and they don't have a union, maybe they don't have that high of standard that we have here in the United States. So globalization in your future. So study foreign languages. Talked about that, a couple chapters ago. Learn about foreign cultures. Take global business courses. That's just going to benefit you all, especially if you're going into business. If you can, learn about different cultures, maybe pick up a second language, that sort of thing. It's just going to benefit you in the long run. So that's all I have for chapter 3, and we will see you next time in chapter 4.